Well, so far this has been terrible. Hey folks, how's it going? Thanks for checking out my video. My name is Joe Giese, and this is my YouTube channel. We're going to talk about some gear and some fun things today. I published a video a couple months ago on Patchbays, and I've been getting some questions on that video and a couple in the comments section here. So basically the question is, how do you get a mic signal from, say, a live room that's plugged into a snake on the wall and running through? It's got to hit some mic pre's, maybe some outboard, and then converters, and do all that without needing a bunch of patch cables. So you've got the same setup every day, and you don't need the flexibility all the time, but you still want it running through a patch bay. So this is how you do that. The important thing to note is that the vertical connections here, they're all independent of each other. There's no horizontal connection. That's what you use a patch cable for. But vertically, that's where you can connect these two jacks together, essentially. And that's done on the back. And what I mean by connecting them together is the most common way to use patch bay is to normal the connections together. And what that means is that the top jack is connected directly down to the bottom jack. But technically, I like to think of it as the connection happening on the back. So they're still independent of each other, but they're connected internally when they're normaled. So you got to remember that outputs go over inputs, outs over ins. So your outs go on the top, ins are all on the bottom, always. So the microphone is where the signal starts, and the microphone is an output, right? That's picking up the source and it's outputting the sound out the XLR jack. So your output goes into the snake, and the snake comes into your control room, and that's what goes in at the top. That's your mic output. And that's normaled into the bottom row. And the bottom row is where you would plug all of your mic pre inputs. So all of these would wire into your mic pre inputs. So now without a patch cable, if this is normaled, when you plug something into microphone input 1 on the wall, that's coming into the patch bay on the top, it's connecting on the bottom, or as you can see in this little graphic, into the connection on the bottom and back out the bottom, and that's connected to the mic pre-input. No patch cables needed in the front. It's just going straight through. So let's say in this particular setup, we've got 8 channels, 8 mic pre's, and 8 channels of line-in conversions. That's why we need the mic pre's. The converters just have line inputs. So 1 through 8 on the top here would be labeled your mic inputs on the wall. 1 through 8. And bottom here, your mic pre's. Now, your outputs of the mic pre's would go into the top row, 9 through 16. So on the front, the top row would be labeled preamps out 1 through 8, but it's using 9 through 16. Okay, so there's your next bank of 8. And then your A to D converters, the inputs on your A to D converters, would be 9 through 16 on the bottom. Make sense? So we've got the mic in on the wall, plug into channel 1. It's going to pass through mic input 1 on the top here, through down, because it's normaled, down into 1, which is the input to the mic pre. Then the mic pre is spitting the output of the preamplified signal out into 9 out, which is the top row here, because outs over ins. And then the input on 9 is connected to your A to D converter. That goes A to D. And then you could even connect the A to D outs 1 through 8 in through, let's say, 17 through 24. There's your last bank of 8. Those could be your converter outputs into the top row. And the bottom row on the bottom, that could be like a summing mixer or an analog console or nothing. It could be just miscellaneous patches for other gear that's completely independent that maybe you don't normal into, but maybe you just leave these, it's called through, so it's 1-to-1 without any internal routing, so you can just access that with a patch cable. So what you get is a full round trip of the signal with no patch cables on the front, just the hardwired connections on the back, and it all stays nice and clean. So the benefit of that is that if you ever plug in, maybe you've got some different preamps down here on 7 and 8, and you really want to use that on your kick drum that's plugged into number 1, then you would grab a patch cable, plug it into 1 on the top, that's the output, so now you've got that on your cable, and patch that into a different mic pre. Outs over ins, that's the easiest way to remember it. Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. So the second piece of this video is going to be about something that I kind of glossed over or omitted in that last video, and that's just another use for a patch bay. So typically the standard thing that you would do with a patch bay is just make sure that every input and every output of every piece of gear that you have in your studio has a patch point on it. So you can run any output to any input and cross patch things wherever you want. Obviously, with lots of gear, that can turn into a very big patch bay with multiples of these stacked up. But one of the other cool things that you can do is mult outputs. And mult is just short for multiple or multiply, I guess. You could have a single mic output. So channel 1 on your snake, that's your output from mic 1, could go to 2 different destinations. So you could do that with a Y cable on the back. You could take your one mic cable and put a Y cable on it and split it into 2 jacks, or you could have multiple outputs of a compressor or a converter. Usually it's just done with mic signals because it's really popular or common to want to record one mic channel into 2 different mic pre's. Maybe you're going to do a mic pre shootout, or maybe you just want 2 different copies of the same signal. You want to compress one, or maybe you want to drive one preamp really hard and leave the other one clean. You can do lots of different things with that. Most commonly, I think it would be used for shooting out a mic pre. You want the same microphone, same signal, same performance, but to go down 2 preamps and record on 2 different channels. You would do that by multing the output with a Y cable. So that's kind of a cool thing. Usually if you have some empty slots down near at the bottom is usually where I find those end up. But the question came from, if I'm plugging a single microphone into 2 different mic pre's, won't I run into impedance problems? Because the loading is going to be different than if you plug the microphone directly into one. So the answer to that gets a little bit heady and technical, and the meat and potatoes of that is somewhat out of my range of comprehension and my ability to explain. But basically, in its simplest form, the way to think about it is, as long as the input side of your signal path is a greatly higher impedance than the output, so the microphone is your output. Most microphones are like in the 1 to 200 ohms range of impedance, and mic pre inputs are usually, again, this is a very rough figure, but they usually aim for the input impedance to be 10 times greater than the output impedance of whatever's driving it. So 1,000 and up, 1,000 ohms and up is usually the input impedance of a mic pre. And once the difference is that great, whether it's 1,000 ohms or 2,000 ohms, kind of doesn't really make a huge difference on the sonics of the microphone. It's not going to load the microphone down. Each mic preamp is going to see half the impedance, so it makes the difference even greater. So normally the mic pre would see a 200 ohm load from a microphone if the microphone has 200 ohm output. And if you hooked up 2 mic pre's, each one would only see 100 ohms. So the mic pre's input impedance is going to be even higher relative to the microphone. So basically it just means that yes, there's a difference there on paper, but I think kind of general consensus is that it doesn't really matter and there's no major sonic difference to doing that. So it's a pretty safe bet to mult microphone outputs just using a Y cable. You could use a passive splitter and run it in that way, but now you need a transformer, or you're introducing other components into the signal chain versus just multing it on a patch bay. You can just do that with wire, and it's super simple, and it's not going to degrade your sound quality at all. So hopefully that answers a couple more questions. Let me know if you've got any additional questions about patch bays or anything else in the studio. Again, my name is Joe Giese. Thanks for watching, and hope you have a good one. Take care.